The sky was dark when the ships arrived. At first, people thought it was some sort of strange storm, but then the ships started descending, cutting through the clouds like knives, massive and intimidating. They were shaped like giant dark triangles, with sharp edges that glimmered in the faint light. There was no sound, no rumble of engines or even a breeze, just the eerie silence as the world watched in terror. The first thing everyone noticed was how many ships there were. It was like the entire sky was filled with them, blocking out the stars, swallowing the sun. There were thousands, maybe more. They moved in perfect formation, each one large enough to take up the sky. No one had ever seen anything like it before. It didn't take long for the world to realize the truth: we were being invaded. The governments of Earth scrambled to respond, but it was clear we were powerless. These beings were far beyond anything we had ever known. Their ships didn't just land, they floated, their edges shimmering with an unnatural light. They had come prepared, and we were too small to stop them. Then the aliens stepped out of their ships. They were tall, with black, shiny armor that reflected the world around them. Their bodies were sleek, almost alien in the way they moved, like they weren't bound by the same physical rules we were. And their eyes were like pools of gold, burning bright, full of power and anger. It was like looking at something ancient and terrifying. The world froze. No one knew what to do. The leader of these aliens, the one who stood taller than the rest, stepped forward. She was a queen. There was no mistaking it. She had an aura of authority, like everything around her was beneath her. Her eyes scanned the people below, sharp and calculating. Her presence alone demanded fear. It was as if she could crush us all with just a thought. The world held its breath. No one dared to speak, no one dared to move. But she did. The queen raised her hand, and a loud, booming voice echoed across the land. "Earth is now under Tikari rule," she declared. "All who resist will be crushed." Her words were cold like ice, without a shred of emotion. And yet there was something undeniable in the way she spoke: power. Raw, brutal power. Every single person on Earth could feel it, like a wave crashing over them. For days, the Tikari made their presence known. The world's armies gathered, but they were no match for the Tikari's advanced weapons. We tried to fight back, but it was like trying to hold back the ocean with our bare hands. One by one, countries surrendered. People were rounded up, placed in camps, their homes turned into prisons. The Tikari didn't care. They only took what they needed, leaving the rest behind in ruins. Life became a blur of fear, uncertainty, and hopelessness. The streets were empty, save for the occasional patrol of Tikari soldiers. Our cities were no longer ours. Our homes weren't safe. We were prisoners in a world we once called our own. But amidst all this chaos, there was a strange, almost haunting beauty. There was a moment in the midst of everything when I looked up and saw her again. The Queen. She was standing on a raised platform, observing us. Her figure was like a shadow against the sky, her armor glistening in the weak sunlight. She didn't need to speak to command attention. She simply was, and everyone knew it. There was a strange feeling that washed over me in that moment. Fear, yes, but something else too. A strange kind of awe. She was not just an alien queen. She was a force of nature, and somehow, in the midst of all the destruction, I couldn't help but notice her. Not as a conqueror, but as something more. Something beyond the destruction she wrought. Something beautiful. I knew I was risking my life by starring, but I couldn't look away. The Queen's eyes met mine across the distance, and for a brief moment, I felt something stir inside me. A strange connection, an understanding that was almost too powerful to comprehend. And then she spoke. "How dare you look at me?" Her voice was like thunder, sharp and commanding. It struck through the air, sending a ripple of fear through the crowd. The soldiers around her stiffened, ready to move, but the Queen raised a hand, silencing them. Her gaze never left me. It felt like the world was spinning, and for a moment everything else disappeared. It was just her and me, standing in a sea of chaos. I felt small, insignificant, like an ant staring up at a towering giant, but I didn't look away. I couldn't. She stepped closer, her eyes still burning into mine. The ground beneath me felt like it was trembling. The soldiers behind her seemed to be waiting for her command to strike. But there was something in her expression, something I hadn't expected. It was confusion. "Do you not fear me?" she asked, her voice softer now, though still laced with authority. "Do you not understand who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure where the words were coming from, but I couldn't stop them. "I know you're the queen. I know you're powerful, but—" "But what?" she pressed, her eyes narrowing. I swallowed, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. "But I still see you." For a moment everything seemed to pause. The entire world seemed to hold its breath. The queen's gaze flickered, and for the first time there was something more than just power in her eyes, something deeper. And for that brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, there was more to her than what the world had seen. The days after the queen's gaze lingered on him were strange. The world around him was still gripped by fear, but something inside him felt different. He couldn't forget the moment when her golden eyes had locked onto his, when she had questioned him with such intensity. It was like a wave of uncertainty had washed over him, and even though he was just a small human, it felt as though the queen had seen him in a way no one else ever had. For a brief second, when their eyes met, there was something in her that wasn't just power. There was something deeper, something human, something that had been hidden beneath the cold, calculating ruler she portrayed. He could still hear her voice asking, "How dare you look at me?" It had been full of authority, but there was something else in it, curiosity maybe, confusion. She had never been questioned before, not in the way he had done. But now, as he walked through the camp where humans were being held, he couldn't shake the thought of her. The queen. She wasn't just a conqueror, she was more. But life went on. Every day felt the same, cold, oppressive, filled with the heavy presence of the Tikari. Their soldiers were everywhere, making sure that humanity stayed in line. The camps were overcrowded and people barely spoke. They kept their heads down, afraid of drawing attention. There was no room for rebellion, no room for hope. Yet despite everything, he couldn't help but notice the small things. The way the queen would stand high above the camp, watching from her platform. The way her eyes would sometimes drift toward him, and then away quickly, like she was almost unsure of what to make of him. She never spoke to him again, but there was something in the way she watched him, a curiosity that made his heart race. One evening, as the sun began to set and the camp fell into a quiet hum of exhaustion, he was working in the fields, moving rocks. His hands were rough from the labor and the air felt heavy with dust. The silence was broken only by the distant shouts of the Tikari soldiers. He didn't expect anything unusual that night. But then he heard footsteps behind him. Not the heavy thuds of armored soldiers, but something different. Lighter, almost hesitant. He turned, his heart racing. Standing there was the queen. She was close now, so close that he could see the faint glow of her armor reflecting the fading light. Her eyes were on him again, that familiar intensity, but this time there was something softer there, something unfamiliar. "Why do you keep looking at me?" Her voice was quieter now, more thoughtful than before. She didn't seem as angry, but there was still power in her words. Her gaze didn't waver from his face. He stood still, unsure of what to say. His throat was dry, but somehow he found his voice. "Because you're different," he said, his voice steady. "You're not like the others." The queen's eyebrows furrowed, her golden eyes studying him closely. "Different? What do you mean?" she asked, her voice laced with confusion. "You're not just a conqueror," he said, his words coming more easily now. "You have more in you, I can see it. You've taken over worlds, yes, but you've never really seen them, not like you should." The queen stood there for a moment, her gaze locked on him. She didn't say anything, but he could tell his words had struck her in some way. She looked almost lost, as though she were hearing something for the first time, something she hadn't considered. For all her power, she had never been questioned like this. And perhaps, in a way, she had never questioned herself either. "You think I have something more?" she asked, her voice soft, almost gentle now. She seemed to be searching for something in him, a piece of herself that she had never known. "I do," he said simply. "You're more than just a queen, you're a person. You can choose. You don't have to be what everyone thinks you are." Her eyes flickered, a brief moment of uncertainty crossing her face. It was like the walls she had built around herself were starting to crack. She had never seen herself this way before, never been asked to think about who she was beyond her title, beyond the power she held over others. "I never asked for this," she whispered almost to herself. "I was born into this role, my people. They made me who I am. I didn't want to conquer, I didn't want to destroy." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and raw. The queen, the being who had conquered countless worlds, who had brought entire civilizations to their knees, was admitting something he never expected to hear. She was vulnerable. He stepped forward, his voice gentle but full of conviction. "You don't have to destroy. You have the power to build. You can change things. You're not just a queen, you're a person." She stared at him, her golden eyes searching his face, looking for the truth in his words. For a moment, the whole world seemed to pause. The tension in the air thickened, and he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the moment. The queen took a deep breath, and for the first time she looked away. Not out of anger, but out of something else. Something that was more than just fear. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the possibility that things didn't have to stay the way they were. I will think about what you've said," she murmured, her voice almost fragile. And just like that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, unsure of what would come next. But something inside him felt different now. He had seen a crack in the armor, a hint of something that could change everything. The queen was not just a conqueror, she was something more. And maybe, just maybe, he had reached her. Days passed, and the world around him continued to feel the weight of the Tikari invasion. The camp was filled with the low hum of everyday suffering. People moved through their routines like ghosts, their faces drained of hope, their bodies exhausted from the endless work. The Tikari soldiers watched over them, cold and unfeeling, ensuring no one stepped out of line. But amidst all this, something had changed for him. He couldn't stop thinking about the queen. The words she had said haunted him. "I will think about what you've said." The truth was, he hadn't expected her to listen. He hadn't expected her to even care. But somehow she had. And every time their paths crossed, even for just a moment, he noticed a slight change in her. The coldness in her gaze was beginning to soften. The unshakable confidence in her posture seemed to falter, if only for a brief second. He began to see her more often now, standing on the high platforms above the camp, looking down. There was no longer just the fear in her eyes. There was something more, something vulnerable. The soldiers who stood beside her still acted with fierce obedience, but she wasn't the same. It was on another quiet evening when the queen appeared again. The sky was painted with the last colors of the setting sun. He was walking through the camp, his mind lost in thought, when a sudden chill filled the air. He looked up, and there she was, standing before him, as tall and imposing as ever. But this time something was different. She wasn't looking down on him with disdain. There was no anger, no edge to her voice. She was simply there. And for the first time, she wasn't surrounded by the usual sea of soldiers. It was just the two of them, standing in the growing darkness, the weight of the world between them. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual, her tone almost unsure. "Why do you keep looking at me like that? Why do you keep speaking to me like I'm just another person?" He swallowed, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. The moment he'd been waiting for. The moment when he had to decide if he was going to tell her what he truly felt, to risk everything. "Because you are just another person," he said, his voice firm despite the fear he felt. "I don't see you as just a queen or a conqueror. I see you as someone who's been trapped in a role you never wanted. I see someone who's been forced into a world of destruction. But I also see someone who could change, who could become something more." Her eyes searched his face, the golden glow of her gaze deepening, as if trying to understand the weight of his words. She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "You think I can change?" she asked quietly, almost with a hint of disbelief. "You think someone like me, who has led millions to war, can just chain?" He stepped closer, his voice steady. "Yes, I do. You've conquered entire worlds, but you've never truly seen them, have you? You've been so focused on power that you've forgotten what it means to be human. But I know you're still capable of that. You're not just some cold ruler. I can see it in you." The Queen's eyes flashed, not with anger this time, but with something softer. There was a quiet sadness in her gaze, a reflection of all the things she had done, all the people she had destroyed, and the weight of it all pressing down on her. For the first time, he saw the cracks in her armor, not the physical one, but the walls she had built around her heart. "I've never known anything else," she admitted, her voice low, almost mournful. "I was born into this life. I didn't ask for this power, but I couldn't escape it. My people, they needed me to be strong, and I became what they wanted me to be, what they needed me to be." He nodded slowly, understanding her pain. "But it's not too late. You don't have to be that person anymore. You have the power to choose, the same power that destroyed so much, could create something new, something better." For a long moment the Queen said nothing. Her gaze remained fixed on him, as though she were trying to read the truth in his eyes. He could feel the weight of her stare, as though she was searching for something he wasn't sure he could give her. Maybe it was trust. Maybe it was hope. "I don't know how," she whispered, almost to herself. "You don't have to know right now," he said gently. "All you need to know is that there's more to you than just destruction. You have the strength to build, to heal." The Queen took a step back, her eyes flickering with emotion. He didn't know what she was thinking. She had always been a symbol of power, of dominance. But now, for the first time, he saw the possibility of something else, something fragile, something real. She wasn't just a conqueror anymore. She was a person. "You really think I can change?" she asked again, her voice small but with a glimmer of something new in it. A hint of hope, perhaps. "Yes," he said, his voice full of conviction. "I believe in you. I believe that you can do better. I believe that you can be better." For a moment the Queen didn't speak. She simply stood there, her gaze focused on him. The silence between them felt heavy, but it wasn't oppressive anymore. It was filled with possibility. The weight of everything they had been through, everything they had lost, hung in the air, but so did the chance to change, to rebuild. "I'll think about it," she said softly, almost to herself. Maybe it's time to stop being who I've always been." And for the first time, he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Something more than just the cold fire of a ruler. Something that might, just might, be the beginning of a new path. The days after that conversation with the Queen felt strange, like the air itself had shifted. The tension in the camp was still there, thick and heavy, but something was different. He couldn't quite explain it, but it was as if the Queen had let a crack appear in the walls she had built around herself. It wasn't just the way she looked at him now. It was the way she held herself, as if she was no longer just a conqueror but something more human. He saw her less often than before, but when their paths did cross, it was different. She didn't have the same cold, distant look in her eyes. Instead, there was something softer there, a small flicker of curiosity. And sometimes, if he was lucky, their eyes would meet, and she would nod slightly, acknowledging him in a way that no one else dared to. It was on another evening, under the heavy darkness of the sky, when he saw her again. This time, she wasn't standing on the high platform looking down at the camp. No, she was walking among the people. It was strange. The Tikari Queen, who had once commanded the earth's surrender with one word, was now walking quietly among the prisoners, without her armor, without the usual air of power. Her steps were slow, deliberate, as if she was lost in thought. She wasn't accompanied by her soldiers. It was just her. She looked almost fragile, something he had never thought possible. She was no longer the unyielding queen that had arrived in such fury. Instead, she was like someone who was lost, someone searching for something, anything, to hold on to. Without thinking, he walked towards her, his heart beating in his chest. His mind screamed at him to stop, to keep his distance. But something deep inside told him he needed to see this through. He had to see if the change he had hoped for was real. "Your Highness," he said cautiously, his voice almost a whisper. The queen stopped in her tracks, her head snapping toward him. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and for a brief moment he saw the flash of the cold, powerful ruler she had once been. But it faded quickly, replaced by something softer, something less certain. "What is it that you want now?" Her voice was softer, gentler than before, but still laced with authority. She wasn't angry, but there was still a hint of the queen within her, a part that remained untouchable, unreachable. He stood before her, unsure of what to say, but the words came out before he could stop them. "I wanted to see you to make sure that you're still considering what we talked about change, about building, not destroying." For a long moment the queen didn't answer. She simply studied him, her gaze intense, as though trying to figure out if he was sincere or if he was just another person trying to manipulate her. But he didn't flinch. He stood there, waiting for her to say something. Finally she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've thought about it, more than you can imagine, and I've realized something." He held his breath, not daring to speak. The silence between them stretched on for a long time. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by power. I've crushed worlds beneath my feet, made people bow before me, but I've never stopped to wonder why. Why have I done all of this? Was it because I wanted to, or because I had no choice?" Her eyes were distant now, as if she were looking back on the long, painful journey she had taken. "I've been so focused on what others wanted from me, what my people expected of me, that I forgot who I was. I forgot that I had the power to choose. I forgot that there was more to life than destruction." He stepped closer, his heart racing. There was a vulnerability in her voice that he hadn't heard before, a raw honesty that made her seem less like a queen and more like a person, just like him. "You don't have to be what everyone expects. You don't have to be who you've always been. You can choose to be someone different, someone better." The queen looked at him for a long time, and he could feel the weight of her gaze. It was like she was searching for something, a sign maybe, that this change was possible. "I've been afraid," she admitted softly. "Afraid to change, afraid to let go of everything I've known. But what if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail?" His heart ached at her words. For the first time he realized how much pain she had been hiding, how much she had buried beneath her armor. "You won't fail," he said firmly, taking another step forward. "You don't have to do it alone. You have the strength to make the right choice. And if you choose to change, if you choose to build instead of destroy, I'll be here. I'll help you." The queen looked at him with something new in her eyes. It wasn't fear or anger or even power. It was hope. For the briefest of moments, he saw the possibility of something more, something that went beyond the war, beyond the destruction. He saw the queen, not as a conqueror, but as a person who had been given a second chance. "I'll try," she said quietly, her voice full of uncertainty. "I don't know how, but I'll try." He smiled, his heart swelling with something he couldn't quite name. "That's all anyone can ask for." The queen stood there, a long pause between them. Then, without saying another word, she turned and walked away. But this time, it was different. She wasn't walking toward more destruction. She was walking toward something else, something uncertain but full of possibility. And for the first time since the invasion began, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The days that followed were filled with an uneasy quiet. The queen's words echoed in his mind: "I'll try." For so long the Tikari had been a symbol of fear, of unyielding power, but now there was something new in the air, something fragile yet strong. The queen had begun her journey of change, and though no one could see it yet, he could feel it. He knew it wasn't going to be easy. Change never was, but he also knew that she was trying, and that was more than he could have ever hoped for. She began to show up more often, though never in the same way. It was never in her grand, regal manner, no soldiers surrounding her, no towering presence. She came quietly, blending into the shadows, watching the camp with a look of deep thought on her face. Sometimes he would see her sitting alone on a high platform, staring out at the horizon, as if searching for something she couldn't yet find. Other times he caught her walking among the prisoners, listening more than speaking, her eyes taking in everything around her. But there was still hesitation. She wasn't ready to fully trust herself, to fully step away from the role she had been born into, and that made sense. She had been a ruler, a queen, for so long. Her life had been nothing but power and control. To let go of that, to embrace something as uncertain as peace and understanding, was a daunting task. But it was a task she had chosen, and that was something. It was the first real step. One evening, when the moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the camp, he saw her again. She was sitting by herself, a rare sight. The other soldiers were far away, not paying attention to her. He walked toward her, his heart pounding with the familiar mix of excitement and fear. Would she still want to talk? Was she still considering the possibility of change? As he approached, she didn't look up immediately. She was lost in thought, her fingers idly tracing patterns in the dirt. For a moment he stood there, unsure of how to break the silence. But then, as if sensing his presence, she looked up. Her golden eyes met his, and for the first time in a long while they didn't carry the weight of command. They were softer, more open. "You've been thinking, haven't you?" he asked, his voice gentle, as though not wanting to disturb the fragile peace between them. She nodded slowly, her gaze drifting back to the horizon. "I've been thinking about everything, about what I've done, and what I could do." Her voice was quiet, tinged with sadness. "I spent so many years building walls around myself. I thought power was all I needed, but now I see how much I've lost, how much I've taken from others." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He knew she had been a conqueror, a ruler who demanded everything in her path. But to hear her admit it, to see the weight of her own regret, was something he hadn't anticipated. She wasn't just the ruthless queen anymore. She was a woman carrying the weight of her choices, trying to figure out if there was a way to change. "Change is never easy," he said, his voice steady. "It takes time, it takes strength, but you don't have to do it alone. People will follow you not because they fear you, but because they believe in what you can become." The queen looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to understand the sincerity in his words. She had always been the one others followed out of fear. The idea of being followed because of belief, of trust, was foreign to her, but it was a thought she had been entertaining. "You really think people would follow me?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "After everything I've done?" "I do," he replied without hesitation, "because they can see that you're trying to change. You're not the same queen who landed on this planet with an army of destruction. You're someone different now, someone with the power to lead with compassion." The queen was silent for a long time, her gaze flickering between him and the dark sky above. For a moment she looked so small, so fragile. The powerful alien queen he had once feared seemed to vanish, leaving behind a person, just a person like everyone else. "I don't know how to be that person," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "I don't know how to be what I should have been all along." He sat beside her, the silence stretching between them. "It's okay not to have all the answers right now," he said softly. "No one does, but you're on the right path. You've already made the hardest choice, to admit that you can change." She looked at him again, and this time there was something in her eyes that wasn't there before. Hope. It was small, but it was there. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough to change, to lead them in a different way?" He smiled gently, reassuring her. "You don't have to do it perfectly. No one expects you to, but I believe in you, and there are others who will too." The queen took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, she wasn't just a queen holding onto the power she had earned. She was a person with fears, with hopes, and with a future that wasn't written yet. "Maybe I can do this," she said quietly, the words coming slowly, like they were something she was just beginning to believe. "I know you can," he said, his voice steady, his heart full of hope. "You've already started." The queen looked up at the stars, the weight of the universe no longer pressing down on her. There was still a long way to go. There would be struggles, mistakes, moments of doubt. But for the first time, she could see a future that wasn't defined by destruction. A future where she could lead not with fear, but with understanding. And that was a beginning. The weeks that followed were full of quiet change. The queen had stopped keeping her distance, and now she moved among the people more freely. She didn't wear her armor and she didn't stand on the high platforms looking down at the camp. Instead, she walked through the crowd, observing, listening, sometimes speaking to the prisoners. It was like she was learning to see the world through their eyes, understanding the depth of the pain she had caused. The soldiers, the ones who had once been so loyal to her, began to notice the change. They whispered among themselves, unsure of what to make of their queen's behavior. Some were suspicious, others curious, but none of them dared to speak against her, at least not openly. The queen had always commanded respect with force, but now it was different. She wasn't just the ruler they feared. She was someone they were starting to see as human. He watched from a distance, his heart swelling with hope. He had known that this journey wouldn't be easy for her, but every time he saw her walking among the people, listening, trying to understand, he saw how far she had come. The power she had once relied on to rule the galaxy was still there, but it was no longer the only thing that defined her. She was starting to define herself. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, he found her again. She was sitting alone on the edge of the camp, looking out at the horizon. The light from the setting sun bathed her in a soft glow, making her appear almost fragile. For a moment, he just watched her, unsure if he should approach. But then he saw it, the look in her eyes. It was the same look she had given him that night, the one filled with uncertainty and vulnerability. She was still carrying the weight of her past, but now it was something she was facing head-on. He walked over to her, his steps quiet. She didn't turn when she heard him approach. Instead, she just kept staring out at the vast emptiness before them. "You've come a long way," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't respond immediately, but her lips pressed into a thin line, and he could see the tension in her shoulders. "I don't know if it's enough," she said, her voice heavy with doubt. "I don't know if I can ever make up for what I've done." He sat down next to her, close but not too close. He understood her hesitation. She had been a conqueror, a ruler of worlds, and now she was trying to be something different. But it wasn't easy to undo a lifetime of choices. "You don't have to make up for everything all at once," he said, his voice steady. "You can't change the past, but you can shape the future, and every step you take, no matter how small, matters." She turned to him then, her eyes full of something he couldn't quite place. Pain, yes, but also hope. It was a fragile hope, one that could easily be shattered, but it was there. "I've been so afraid," she admitted, her voice soft and raw. "Afraid that if I change, I'll lose everything. The respect, the power. I've spent so long building my empire, and now I don't know if I can let it go." He understood that fear. He could see it in her eyes, feel it in the way her hands trembled slightly as they rested in her lap. She had built her entire identity around the power she held, and now she was being asked to give it up, not entirely, but enough to change everything. "You don't have to lose everything," he said gently. "You're not the same person you were before. You don't need power to command respect. People will follow you because they believe in you, because they believe in the person you are becoming." She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. It was clear that she didn't fully believe him yet, but something in her shifted. Her expression softened, the hard edge of her past slipping away just a little. "I don't know if I can lead without fear," she said quietly. "It's all I've ever known. I've never known what it's like to be followed for anything other than the fear I inspire." He smiled, though it was a sad smile. "It's not about fear. It's about trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the people around you, and trust that you can be more than what you were." For a long time, the queen said nothing. She simply stared at the horizon, her thoughts heavy in the silence between them. He didn't push her. He knew that this was something she had to figure out on her own. She had already taken the hardest step by admitting her desire for change. The rest would come, but it would take time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to try. I want to lead differently, but I'm scared." He nodded, understanding. "It's okay to be scared. Change is terrifying, but you don't have to do it alone." She looked at him, her golden eyes filled with a mix of emotions. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but sincere, "for believing in me, for helping me see what I couldn't." He smiled, his heart light. "I'm just showing you what you've always been capable of. You were always more than a conqueror. You just needed to believe in yourself." She didn't respond, but the look in her eyes was enough. He knew she was still uncertain, still afraid, but for the first time there was a flicker of certainty in her. She wasn't the same queen who had come to Earth with fire in her eyes and destruction in her wake. She was someone different, someone willing to change, to try to build a better future. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days stretched into weeks, and the camp began to change, though not in any way that was easy to see. It was subtle, the way the air seemed just a little lighter, the way the prisoners began to talk more openly, their voices no longer hushed with fear. It wasn't that everything was perfect, but it was different. And in that difference there was a kind of hope, the kind that could grow, the kind that had the potential to change everything. The Queen, once feared across the galaxy, had begun to change too. No longer did she walk with the cold authority that had defined her rule. Now when she moved through the camp, it was with a quiet grace, as though she were learning to walk alongside those she had once ruled over, not above them. She had stopped standing on the high platforms, looking down at the people from a distance. Now she stood among them, listening, speaking, learning. She was no longer just the conqueror. She was beginning to be a leader in a new way, one that was defined not by fear, but by trust. The soldiers still kept their distance, unsure of what to make of the changes in their queen. Some of them whispered among themselves, questioning her decisions. But there was no open rebellion, no defiance. There was only confusion and a slowly growing sense of doubt. The queen had not yet told them of her desire to change. It was something she had to do quietly, letting her actions speak for her before she could risk a direct confrontation with the past she had built. But for him, watching from the sidelines, it was clear. The queen was changing. It was slow, painfully slow, but every day she seemed just a little softer, a little less distant. She had started to visit the humans in the camp more often, sitting with them, speaking to them, listening to their stories. He had seen her speak with families torn apart by war, with children who had lost everything. He had seen the way she listened, truly listened, as if her own heart was opening for the first time. One evening, when the camp was quieter than usual, he found her again. She was sitting on a low wall by herself, her back to the setting sun, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. There was something peaceful about her in that moment, as though she had finally found some kind of peace within herself. He approached her carefully, as if afraid to disturb the quiet that surrounded her. She didn't look up immediately. For a long time she just sat there, her posture relaxed, almost contemplative. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of everything she had been through, everything she was still trying to become. "I've made my decision," she said quietly. "I can't change everything at once. I can't undo the past, but I can start now, and that's enough." He sat down beside her, his heart swelling with a quiet pride. "What are you going to do?" The queen took a deep breath, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. "I will not rule through fear anymore. I won't demand obedience just because of who I am. I want to build something better, something that doesn't depend on destroying others. I want to help people, to guide them, not with power but with understanding." He smiled, a gentle smile full of hope. "You've already begun. Every day you walk through this camp, talking to people, learning about their lives, their struggles, that's how change begins." She turned to him then, her golden eyes meeting his, and for the first time he saw something that had never been there before, true certainty. She wasn't just a ruler trying to figure out what to do next. She was a leader who had already taken the first step toward a new path. "I don't know how to lead like this," she admitted, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "I've always been taught that power was everything, but now I see that it's not. It's about trust. It's about listening. I have to earn that trust. I have to show them that I am different." "You will," he said, his voice full of conviction. "You already are." The Queen smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her since their first meeting. It was small, almost fragile, but it was there. And in that smile he saw the future, a future where the Queen was no longer a conqueror but a leader. A future where the Tikari could choose a different path, one built not on destruction, but on understanding. For a long while they sat in silence, watching the last light of the day fade into the night. The camp was quiet around them, the world at peace for a fleeting moment. And in that quiet he realized something. The Queen, this powerful, terrifying ruler who had once brought fear to the entire planet, was no longer the same person. She had begun to see the world differently, and in turn, she had begun to change the world. She stood up slowly, her movements more deliberate now, as though every step she took was a reminder of the change she had made. "It won't be easy," she said, her voice steady now, full of purpose. "There are still many who will resist, who won't understand, but I will try. I will fight for a future where we can coexist." And with that the Queen walked away, her back straight, her steps confident but still full of the uncertainty that came with change. She wasn't perfect, not by any means. She didn't have all the answers, but she had taken the first step, and that was enough. For the first time since the invasion, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: hope. The world was changing, and so was the Queen. Together they would build something new.